Most people quit before they fail. That is the part no one talks about. They do not quit because they cannot continue. They quit because continuing became uncomfortable. There is a critical difference between those two things, and understanding that difference is the beginning of everything. Watch a person closely when difficulty arrives. Not when life falls apart completely. Not when the situation is catastrophic. Watch them when things just get hard, when progress slows, when the results stop coming quickly. When the process becomes tedious, repetitive, unrewarding, that is the moment of truth. That is when you see who a person actually is, underneath the goals they set, in moments of motivation, underneath the identity they perform for others. When the discomfort becomes real, the real person shows up. And most of the time, that person leaves, not dramatically, not with a speech. They simply stop showing up. They find a reason. They discover a new priority. They tell themselves they will return when the conditions are better, when the timing is right, when they feel ready. And those conditions never arrive, because they were never the actual problem. The problem was always internal. We live in an era that has made discomfort optional in ways that no previous generation experienced. This is not a complaint about modern life. It is an observation about what modern comfort has done to human psychology. When warmth is available at the adjustment of a thermostat, when food arrives in under 30 minutes, when entertainment is infinite and always within reach, when boredom can be eliminated before it fully forms, the nervous system adapts. It recalibrates. It begins to interpret discomfort not as a natural part of living, but as a problem to be solved immediately, as a signal that something has gone wrong. The body is extraordinarily intelligent. It learns what you teach it, and for the last several decades, we have been teaching it that discomfort should not last. That friction should be removed. That if something hurts or strains or resists, the correct response is relief, not endurance. Relief. This has consequences that run much deeper than physical softness. It creates a psychological reflex, a habitual pattern where the mind scans for an exit the moment something becomes difficult. The person no longer consciously decides to quit. They have practiced quitting so many times in small ways across so many years that avoidance has become automatic. It has become their default operating system. This is how quitting becomes an identity, not through one big decision, through accumulation, through the compounding of small surrenders. Every time you stop slightly before the point of real difficulty, you teach yourself something. You teach yourself that difficulty is the boundary, that the edge of comfort is the limit of your capability. And over time, that belief solidifies. It becomes structural. It becomes the architecture of how you see yourself and what you believe you are capable of. Not because it is true, but because you have provided yourself with consistent evidence that it is. The human mind is a pattern recognition machine. It does not simply record events, it draws conclusions from them. And if the pattern it has recorded is that you leave when things get hard, it will present that option faster and faster every time pressure appears. The internal voice will become more persuasive. The justifications will become more sophisticated. The exit will become easier to take because the mind has learned that you will take it. This is why so many intelligent, talented, capable people produce less than they should. It is not lack of ability. It is lack of a trained relationship with discomfort. They have the raw material. They do not have the psychological infrastructure to endure the process required to use it. Now, consider the behaviors that accompany this pattern. Because they are recognizable, they follow a predictable structure. The first is the excuse, not the lie. The excuse is more sophisticated than a lie. It contains partial truth. It references real obstacles. It acknowledges genuine difficulty, but it uses that difficulty as sufficient reason to stop rather than as context to push through. The person who makes excuses is not always being dishonest. They are often being psychologically avoidant while maintaining the appearance of rationality. They have found a way to protect the story they tell about themselves while simultaneously withdrawing from the effort required to make that story real. The second is emotional decision-making. This is the pattern of allowing how you feel in a particular moment to govern choices that carry long-term consequences. You feel tired, so you skip. You feel unmotivated, so you postpone. You feel frustrated, so you reevaluate whether this path was ever right for you. Emotion becomes the governing authority, even though emotion is one of the least reliable sources of guidance available to a human being. Not because emotion has no value, it does, but because emotion is designed for immediate response, not long-term strategy. Allowing it to direct long-term decisions is like using a thermometer to navigate. It tells you something real, but it does not tell you where to go. The third is the externalization of responsibility, the circumstances, the timing, the people who did not support you, the environment that was not conducive. This thinking is almost always partially accurate, which is what makes it so dangerous. Circumstances do matter. Timing does matter. Support structures do matter, but the person who builds their explanation for failure primarily on external factors has removed themselves from the equation. They have made themselves a passenger in their own life, and passengers do not get to choose the destination. Not the fourth is the search for the shortcut, not efficiency, not intelligent optimization. The shortcut. The way that produces the result without requiring the cost. This search is revealing because it shows where the real resistance lives, not in laziness necessarily, but in a fundamental unwillingness to accept that certain things cost what they cost, that there is no renegotiation, that the process demands what it demands, and your comfort level has no bearing on that demand. These behaviors are not character flaws. They are trained responses. They can be untrained, but only through sustained, deliberate, uncomfortable practice. Here is something that is rarely framed this way, but it is accurate. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is information. It tells you where growth is possible. It marks the boundary between what you currently are and what you could become. The discomfort you feel during rigorous training, during financial discipline, during social isolation in pursuit of a goal, during the long, quiet, unrewarded middle of any serious endeavor. That discomfort is not evidence that something is wrong. It is evidence that something is happening. Weakness is the enemy, not pain. Weakness is the refusal to remain in the presence of pain long enough to extract what it offers. Weakness is the premature retreat, the decision to preserve comfort at the cost of growth. Weakness is not an insult. It is a description of a choice pattern, and choice patterns can be changed. What endurance actually builds is not always visible from the outside. People watch someone who has endured significant difficulty, and they often attribute the result to talent, or genetics, or opportunity. What they cannot see is a psychological architecture that was constructed through the endurance itself. The capacity to remain calm under pressure was not innate. It was built during the times when pressure arrived and the person chose to stay with it rather than escape from it. The ability to work without external validation was not natural. It was forged during the long periods when no validation came and the work continued anyway. The emotional steadiness that characterizes a genuinely disciplined person was not given. It was earned. Repetition by repetition, discomfort by discomfort, surrender resisted, again and again and again. Character is not declared, it is constructed. And the material it is built from is repeated exposure to difficulty, followed by the choice to remain. This is the part that the shortcut culture misunderstands most profoundly. The goal is not just the destination. The process is shaping the person who will arrive at it. Two people can reach the same external outcome through vastly different processes, and they will be fundamentally different people when they get there, with vastly different capacities for what happens next. The person who endured the process is not just more capable, they are more stable, more prepared, more equipped to handle the complexity that comes with the thing they pursue. Growth requires physical discomfort, not abuse, not recklessness, but the genuine strain of demanding more from your body and your mind than they are currently prepared to give. The muscles do not grow during the exercise. They grow during recovery from stress. The mind does not become resilient during comfort. It becomes resilient by experiencing pressure, surviving it, and integrating that survival into its understanding of what it is capable of. Growth requires mental pressure, sustained over time. The kind of mental pressure that comes from holding a complex goal in your mind across months and years without constant feedback that it is working. Without the dopamine of visible progress. Holding the direction without holding certainty. That is extraordinarily difficult. It requires a kind of faith that is not religious, but structural. A faith in the logic of the process even when the evidence is not yet present. Growth requires repetition without applause. This is perhaps the hardest element for the contemporary mind, which has been conditioned to receive feedback almost in real time. The training session that no one sees. The work completed at midnight that no one acknowledges. The discipline maintained in private, without documentation, without witnesses, without the affirmation of an audience. This is where the real work lives, not in the visible moments. In the invisible ones. And growth requires delayed gratification on a scale that most people are no longer accustomed to. Not weeks, sometimes years. The commitment to invest in something whose return is not guaranteed, not immediate, and not certain, because you have decided that the person you will become through the investment is worth more than the comfort you would have preserved by not making it. Now consider the two patterns. Not two types of people, two patterns. Because the patterns can be changed. If you refuse to quit, comment, "I endure."